Right now, in South Korea, a 20-year-old aesthetic infrastructure is being systematically liquidated. To understand the current collapse, we must first document the foundation of the industry that defined Korean broadcasting for 2 decades. Since the early 2000s, female weathercasters in South Korea operated under a strict, unwritten professional code that prioritized visual capital over atmospheric expertise. The standard was the high-glamour bodycon dress. These outfits were meticulously engineered to accentuate the S-line silhouette, utilizing ultra-tight fabrics, high hemlines, and aesthetic styling that blurred the line between professional meteorology and fashion modeling. This was not a random occurrence, it was a calculated economic strategy. These women were almost exclusively non-regular contract workers. They did not have the job security of tenured anchors, so they utilized their physical appearance as a strategic asset to build a personal brand. In a hyper-competitive media market, a viral 15-second clip of a weather report could lead to commercial deals, increased appearance fees, and a direct path to celebrity status. The weather report was the soft entry point for women to enter the elite sphere of South Korean media. However, between 2021 and 2024, this established system encountered a catastrophic ideological collision. A massive wave of online criticism erupted from radical feminist circles, initiating what would become a total aesthetic insurrection. These activists labeled the weathercasters as victims of the corset and sexual commodities. The core of their argument was that a meteorologist's primary function is the delivery of atmospheric data, and that requiring these women to serve as visual eye candy for a male-dominated viewership was a form of structural violence. The rhetoric quickly escalated. Activists began utilizing the room salon analogy, comparing the broadcasting industry's aesthetic requirements to the hostess bar culture of Gangnam. They claimed that the national airwaves were being turned into a high-end lounge for the nation's elderly men. This movement was not merely a call for wardrobe changes, it was a demand for the total deconstruction of the role itself. They demanded that the industry stop objectifying women and start hiring based on scientific merit alone. The management of major networks, specifically the Munhwa Broadcasting Corporation or MBC, faced a choice: defend their ratings-driven aesthetic model or capitulate to the mounting PR pressure. They chose the latter. In a series of formal announcements, MBC and other major broadcasters signed internal memorandums of understanding, involving management, labor unions, and external watchdogs like Workplace Harassment 119. This was the formal death warrant for the traditional weathercaster. The job title itself was officially abolished, replaced by the weather and climate expert role, a permanent tenured position that fundamentally changed the entry requirements. The networks took the activists' demands for professionalism literally. They did not just change the clothes, they changed the humans. The demographic shift that followed was instantaneous and absolute. As the contract-based pretty girl positions were phased out, they were replaced by highly qualified men. The first wave of these new experts arrived with overwhelming academic and professional resumes that the previous generation of presenters could not match. These were not influencers or models, these were spec-monsters. We are talking about graduates from top-tier global institutions like Monash University in Australia, specializing in atmospheric science. These are individuals who hold National Meteorological Engineer licenses, a certification with a pass rate of less than 15% that requires deep knowledge of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics. Most notably, the networks began hiring former weather officers from the Republic of Korea Air Force. These are men who spent their mandatory military service handling billion-dollar flight safety data and coordinating with fighter wings. They brought a level of clinical military-grade authority to the screen that made the previous aesthetic-focused reports look like amateur hour. The irony of this transition is that the same feminist circles that demanded this change are now launching a secondary outcry. As the female-dominated contract roles disappeared, replaced by tenured men in suits, the narrative shifted. From "stop objectifying us" to "they are stealing women's jobs." The activists realized too late that by destroying the aesthetic barrier to entry, they had inadvertently created a spec wall that 99% of female applicants could not climb. They traded a field where women had a natural competitive advantage for a field where they have to compete against military-trained scientists with international degrees. The liberation they shouted for became the very mechanism of their exclusion. Now let us look at the raw, ugly truth of this liquidation. You activists did not liberate anyone, you nuked your own sanctuary. You spent years screaming about the corset and the patriarchal gaze, but you forgot one thing: the corset was a golden ticket. For 20 years, thousands of women used their visual capital to bypass the grueling, soul-crushing spec war that defines the rest of South Korean society. They were sucking honey. They traded a tight dress and a smile for a $100,000 commercial deal and a shortcut to the top of the social ladder. They didn't need a degree from Monash or a license from the Air Force because they had the S-line. And you, the ugly sisterhood, decided that if you couldn't have that honey, no one could. You weren't fighting for equality, you were committing professional cannibalism. You saw your more attractive sisters succeeding on the glass floor, that safety net of beauty-based employment, and you decided to shatter it. Well, congratulations. The glass floor is gone and everyone is falling. You demanded meritocracy? You got it. Now, instead of a 24-year-old woman in a pretty dress telling us if it's going to rain, we have a 32-year-old Air Force lieutenant with a physics degree who doesn't care about your movement or your feelings. He is uncancelable. You can't call him a puppet of the incel gaze because he has the specs to back up every word he says. He is a tenured professional with a government-sanctioned license. The networks performed a brilliant move of institutional jiu-jitsu. They took your demands for professionalism and used them to justify hiring high-spec men, who are far less likely to cause PR scandals or demand visual-based salary negotiations. They shielded themselves from your sexism accusations by hiring the most objectively qualified candidates in the history of the industry. This is the ultimate paradox of the modern activist. You claim that beauty was a burden imposed by men, failing to realize that for these women, beauty was a strategic tool for social mobility. By breaking the corset, you burned the ladder. You replaced the female-dominated aesthetic field with a male-dominated scientific field and called it a victory until the paychecks for your sisters stopped clearing. The honey-sucking era is over. Welcome to the spec war. You wanted to be judged on your brains? Fine. Go get a PhD in atmospheric science. Go spend 3 years in the Air Force handling billion-dollar flight paths. Go pass the engineer exam that fails 85% of people on the first try. You can't? Then step aside and let the professionals work. The reaction from male-dominated forums has been one of pure triumphalism. They're calling this the incel triumph, but it's actually just the return of the real world. For years, men complained they couldn't get these jobs because they weren't pretty enough. Now, women are complaining they can't get these jobs because they aren't smart enough or experienced enough. The table has turned, but the unfairness hasn't changed. It just shifted from the eyes to the resume. You complained about the room salon broadcast, and now you have the laboratory broadcast. Are you happy now? You traded eye candy for a spec monster, and now you're surprised that the monster is a man. This is the Meritocracy Meat-Grinder. It doesn't care about your narrative. It doesn't care about your 14,000 character manifestos on gender-based objectification. It only cares about the data. The MBC safety play worked perfectly. They used your own ideology to fire your sisters and hire their brothers. And they did it with your full-throated approval until the moment the first man walked onto the set in a suit. You asked for the normalization of the industry. You asked for the removal of visual commodities. You got exactly what you wished for, and it is the ultimate nightmare for the very women you claim to be protecting. The spec wall is 100 feet high and made of solid academic credentials. If you want a seat at the table now, you better have the degree because the dress is worthless. The era of the pretty amateur is dead, buried under a pile of Monash University diplomas and Air Force service records. You nuked the honey, and now everyone has to eat the dirt of the spec war. Why are you still surprised? You demanded a world where appearance doesn't matter, and the market responded by making appearance matter 0%. But in a world where appearance matters 0, the only thing that counts is the spec. And in the spec war, the person who spent 10 years studying fluid dynamics will always beat the person who spent 10 minutes picking out a dress. You traded a soft entry role for a hard entry role and then wondered why the door was locked. This isn't misogyny, it's the logical conclusion of your own demands. You dismantled the glass floor and now you're screaming because you're hitting the basement. You trade visual capital for intellectual capital, but you didn't check to see if your sisters had any intellectual capital to trade. You committed suicide by activism. You handed the entire industry over to the patriarchy on a silver platter and called it liberation. Look at the new hires, 185 centimeters tall, broad shoulders, Air Force background, atmospheric science degree. This is the new face of the Korean weather. He is a climate lieutenant. He doesn't need your approval. He doesn't need a viral clip. He has tenure. He is the physical manifestation of your failure. Every time he speaks, he's a reminder that you destroyed a career path for thousands of women because it made you feel insecure. You called it a corset. They called it a paycheck. Now the paycheck is his, and the corset is in the trash, along with the career prospects of every aspiring female broadcaster in the country. This is the aesthetic liquidation. The market has corrected itself. The beauty premium has hit 0, the Spec-Monsters have won, and they have you to thank for it. Do you see the pattern yet? You attack the beauty standard because you think it's a tool of oppression, but you fail to see it as a tool of competition. By removing beauty as a factor, you didn't make things fair. You just changed the metric of competition to one that favors a completely different demographic. You took away the one weapon your sisters had and then pushed them into a fight against military scientists. It's not a tragedy, it's a comedy of errors. The spec bomb has been dropped and the fallout is permanent. There is no going back to the S-line, there is no going back to the tight dresses. The networks have seen the light. They have realized that hiring high-spec men is the ultimate shield against the modern activist. You can't cancel a man for being too qualified. You can't protest a network for hiring an Air Force officer with a license. You have been outmaneuvered by the very people you thought you were changing. So, here is the question for the next generation. Are you ready for the spec war? Because the honey is gone, there are no more shortcuts. There are no more easy rides on the glass floor. If you want to be on that screen, you'd better be ready to compete with the 15% pass rate. You'd better be ready to spend years in a lab or a military weather station. You wanted equality? This is it. It's cold, it's dry, and it doesn't care about your silhouette. It only cares about the dew point and the atmospheric pressure. The pretty girl is dead. Long live the climate lieutenant. The irony is the only thing left that's still free of charge. You nuked the sanctuary and now you have to live in the ruins. Welcome to the real world, where the degree beats the dress every single time. Fuel the truth at dating in Korea, support the structure, stay safe in the lounge.